Welcome. This is Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. I'm Butch Nicholson, and I'll be your host today. Uh, Before we get started, I just want to thank our sponsor, Fist Bump. Uh, you can reach Fist Bump at getfistbumps.com. And again, just thanks to them for sponsoring our show today. This is where experience comes to level up. This is where old school wisdom meets new school tools. And today I'm excited to have Chris Dunn on the show. I'll let Chris introduce himself for a minute or two in just a second, but I'll say this. Uh, I've known Chris as long as I've been working for Fist Bump, the last 2.5 years, 3 years. And he is a shining example about what we're going to talk about today. And he has, from almost no presence on LinkedIn to having a business that is really thriving from the work that he's done there. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This is a great place to learn actually how to do it. There's not going to be a lot of fluff in this. This is going to be straightforward, what Chris did and what Chris does. And the one thing we do know is that it works. So with that, Chris, give us a little background on how you got to where you are.
Awesome. Well, hey Butch, thanks much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I'm kind of an old school guy, so this seems like a good spot for me. I know that you kind of cater to talking to people of our generation, baby boom and Gen X and so forth. So I'm firmly planted in my 58th year here on the planet. And yeah, a little bit about me. We can get into my journey. I am the VP of Sales and New Business Development for a company called Blue Hive Exhibits. We are in the trade show and event world. I have been with this very company here for about 20 years, which I know is pretty pretty odd for a lot of folks who these days tend to bounce around a fair amount. Prior to that, I was with another exhibit company for about 10 years prior. So I've been in the industry for about 30 years as a whole. And yeah, I'm learning to adapt and use new tools in kind of but do it in a way that feels comfortable and is really we're very much relationship builders. So that's kind of how I've always built out my business, built out opportunities uh, related to to clients and customers, and I kind of came up in an age where networking and going to lunches and dinners and so forth was kind of the norm. So I've always really enjoyed that kind of social side of the sales process. So again, thanks for having me here. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So, Chris, you're probably about a year and a half ahead of me on a real LinkedIn journey. Um,
Okay.
I believed you needed to have a LinkedIn account. So, when uh, websites first started, it was kind of like if your company didn't have a website, were you a real company or not?
Right.
And that's the way I looked at LinkedIn. You needed to be on LinkedIn to be real. But how well I use LinkedIn is this: when I came to work for Fist Bump 2.5 years ago on LinkedIn, my job was 2 jobs old. There was an email address that didn't exist, and I think I may have commented 2 or 3 times, but they were just like the generic "Happy birthday" or "Congratulations on your new job." So
Yeah.
basically, I had nothing that would have helped anyone.
Yeah.
Uh, so I know you a little different from you, but it just makes sense that nobody was doing big events during COVID. So you had a little time, and share with the audience how you started your LinkedIn journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no, happy to kind of walk through that. And you're right. I signed up for LinkedIn. I don't know. I didn't even know when, but it was a while back. But like you, I kind of didn't really use it. I didn't. It was people were looking for jobs and things of that nature, and it just kind of was what it was. And then we hit COVID. And COVID, obviously, as you noted, for the event world, just brought everything to a screeching halt. And listen, everybody was put out. We were all kind of working from our homes. We were trying to figure out what's this new normal thing look like, and how are we going to do sales, like this right here. Starting to use Teams and Zoom and um, you know Google Meets and all of those tools and so forth for the first time, becoming comfortable with this type of a medium. Like all those things were new for us. And as you had mentioned, there was no events, there was no trade shows, right? So kind of searching for like, okay, so what am I going to do? What can I control? Well, there's an awful lot that I can't control, but I can control my network. So I started to say, you know what, I'm going to take this opportunity. I have all this extra time. I'm still employed at this point in the early days of COVID. I'm going to spend the bulk of my days on LinkedIn. And I started reaching out to other event professionals. It was really kind of a shared misery situation. It was like, hey, I said, and I did so in a geographic manner. So I'm in the Boston area. So I started, Boston, New England, New York. I just started to reaching out to people in the Northeast, let's say, who were in the event world, and I started striking up conversations with folks because there was this shared misery situation. It's like, man, I never realized how much I liked working and how much I loved doing events until there were none. And now this really sucks. And, we had this common bond. They were very easy conversations. I was not selling anything. They were not selling anything. But I was building relationships in that fashion. And I would say I probably went into that time frame with a belief of like, what do you do with LinkedIn? LinkedIn is a professional network, right? So you keep it super professional. So I think I had posted probably a little bit, prior to the pandemic, but I also said, you know what? At the really, our company philosophy was like, we're going to be one of the companies that makes it through this. We're going to be a company that lasts. So I started leaning into the visual aspect of our business. Right, we do these events, mostly trade shows. I've got pictures from years and years and years of shows, and I started using that as my posting kind of a platform. Like, hey, I know there's no events right now, but here's a cool picture of something that we did in 2017, 2015, 2018, whatever it was. And I would post about the booth, and I would just kind of talk a little bit about what we were seeing. And through kind of those efforts, I started to, I guess, I don't think they were followers at the time. I forget what they were, but ultimately people who were kind of, either connections or people who were kind of, following along. And like people attract other like people. So anybody kind of in that event and exhibit world, we were all missing what we normally love to do. So those pictures kind of resonated. And over time, in a fairly short period of time, that kind of plays out to some extent.
Sure.
But I started seeing people kind of veering off just a solely professional approach to LinkedIn, and they started getting more personal with it. And at first, it felt kind of odd, right? It was different. I remember one of the first posts that I put up with a picture of my dog, and I literally asked, like, is this okay for LinkedIn, or is this Facebook, right? And it was kind of asking that question. Like, I'm seeing people getting more personal. And I know Brandon uses the word humanity, right? They were exposing more of their humanity, and it wasn't just about what do I do for work, and then keeping it totally focused on that. So I was following a guy. He was an agency owner. He lived in Utah, and it happened to be in the winter, right? So it must have been kind of, I don't know if it was the beginning of, yeah, I think it might have been like March or April, right? Everybody got basically sent home on St. Patty's Day. So it must have been March or April, right? We're brand new in the pandemic, trying to figure stuff out. And I see this guy making a post from a ski lift. And he's like, I got my team with me. We had a great meeting this morning. We did some work with a client. Now we're enjoying the fact that we live in Utah. We're skiing. And I was like, that's really cool. I kind of want to follow this guy and see what he's doing, because I'm a skier, and he's in an agency role, and we're kind of an agency. So that opened my eyes to like maybe this platform might be evolving or doing something a little different. I don't think I didn't see the big picture at that point, but that was one of the first times where I remember like talking about something other than just exactly, what is it that you do for work is actually okay. It's not just okay. It's maybe it's a good thing. So that was kind of my first eye-opening experience, and that was, I guess, in 2020, right? So at that point, I'd been on the platform for a bunch of years, but really never done anything with it. And then I would say that's kind of really more or less where my journey began.
So, Chris, let me ask you this. Uh, when I first started in sales, the the first thing I remember hearing was people buy from people buyers buy from sellers who they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And uh, I'm a good bit older than you, and so in the 80s, in the 90s, and even into the early 2000s, I had two different sales jobs that I did really really well in, just following that know, like, and trust model. But
Hmm.
in those days, the way you built know, like, and trust was you took people to play golf, you took people to plays, you took people to concerts, whatever they like to do, that's what you did, and you
Right.
had lunches, and you had networking meetings,
Yeah.
which I used to hate networking meetings, but
Yeah.
you'd have to drive to this place. You'd go into a big room. There'd be 100 people there. You knew like three people you wanted to find. You wind up having to talk to a bunch of people, and then found out the three people you wanted to talk to weren't there, and you had to get back in your car and drive home, and you wasted 3 hours. Or even if those three people were there, you're in. People are knocking you around, spilling drinks on you. Uh, you mentioned Brandon, and one thing Brandon talks about is LinkedIn is really just a 24/7, 365 networking meeting. Speak to
Yeah.
that if you would.
Yeah, I think the key point behind that, and again, as I kind of look back over what I've learned, and a lot of that has been since I've became involved with Fist Bump a couple of years ago, and started out just doing the coaching program. Ultimately led me to having a show of my own, and still being part of that coaching. So what I know now, and then trying to look back and maybe extend that lens of what I know and see now, is it's a little difficult because everything's so clear now on, but at the time we were, I think, figuring it out. But the crux or the basis of what you're talking about is like when we networked, whether it's a networking meeting, you take somebody to a ball game, you're at a dinner with them, you're playing golf, whatever it is, like you're not just talking about your product and your benefits the whole time. As a matter of fact, that's a tiny piece of it, probably, right? Yes, there's going to be a business discussion at some point. Um, but you talk about your family, and you talk about like, where did you guys vacation last year? Or what's that team, what's your favorite college football team? Like, who are you following? Oh, do we have a rivalry maybe against some of the teams we root for? Whatever it is that you're into, and you find that you do that, rapport building with the person, and you explore like what brought you to the area, right? And you find that common thread. Might be a team, might be a geographic location, might be a business experience, might be where you went to college, whatever it was, right? You found those things, and you built relationships based on commonalities. So taking that whole premise and then putting it, laying it on top of like, well, how do we act? How do we show up on LinkedIn? And I think, again, so many people either, you know, who maybe they're newish to it now, or they started a while back, but it was like you show up and it's like, this is a professional network. I'm just going to talk about what I do, and I'm going to basically pitch slap anybody who even looks in my direction, or maybe not even, right? Maybe I'll just go pitch slap them, and just throw my brochure in their face, and be like, hey, you want to buy something? Versus showing up and starting conversations from a human level, and building a little bit of rapport and finding commonalities, and earn the right, by making those deposits. and being there to support that person, asking, being the person who's asking the questions and not talking about yourself, but trying to find out about the other people. How can I help you? Is there anything I can, introduce you to people in my network and things, and be, kind of come at it from a true networker's mentality, knowing that at some point the opportunity to introduce what I do will be more appropriate. And whether you need my service, if I catch lightning in a bottle and I find that you actually need my services right now, that's great. But that happens 1 or 2% of the time, right? So out of 100 people that you meet, literally one, two, maybe three of them might need you right away. The other 96, 97, 98 of them, maybe they need you in the future, right? So that's basically not being overly salesy, not being somebody who scares people away, but just you're just here to build a relationship and build that that brand equity and get people to a point where they know, like, and trust you because of what you're posting and how you're commenting and how you're meeting and showing up and engaging with people on the platform.
So, Chris, we have somebody in the chat that's just showing up as LinkedIn user, but I want to thank LinkedIn user for being here today, and
Gotcha.
thank you for your comment. Some of my strongest business relationships have now become longtime friends, uh, and that's true. So, I mean, two of the absolute best relationships I have are people that I've met business wise. So thanks for that comment. That's so true. Uh, Chris, one of the things I don't think people they don't get it unless they hear this. But this is an analogy I make. If you were at a networking meeting and somebody came up to you and you could tell they were looking at your name tag so they would know your name and said, "Hey, Chris, great to meet you. When can we book a demo?"
Right.
But that's the same thing I see companies do all the time when the LinkedIn post is just really a brochure for the company. Why do I care about that? And I really believe people want to know who you are before they care what you do.
Yeah, yeah, fully agreed. And just to address our friend here who commented, I would agree. Right, there's something about a business relationship that when you have kind of been in the trenches with people and that shared experience of hardship, it builds a deeper bond. And in my business,
Oh crap.
floor and a lot of folks who are listening, a lot of people hate them. A lot of people are like, I don't want anything to do with trade shows. They're, it's a lot of work, super uncomfortable. You got to get up early. You got to always be talking. You got to be on your A game. Right. There's that shared experience. So whether it's on our end where we're maybe struggling to get the booth set up and we're, banging our heads against the GCs aren't, putting a sign up when they should. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong that are outside of our control. We share those experiences in many cases with our exhibitor, and it builds a bond. That's just an example of what I do, but every obviously has those experiences with your clients where maybe things were a little bumpy, and in many cases those relationships become stronger because you've endured. You kind of both went through the crucible, as it were, and there were some times where things weren't all that great, but then you delivered and you made you delivered the project. You brought the product to market or whatever it was, right? So those relationships have gotten stronger. That's the trust factor, right? That's the trust of the know,
Sure.
like, and trust. Somebody can know you and like you, but if you didn't deliver, they may not trust you, right? So if there's each one of those pieces is an important part of that process. And I got to admit, I just kind of went off on a little tangent. I think I lost track of the question that you actually asked me.
You answered it.
Okay, okay, good.
So and one thing to your point there, another thing I heard early on in sales was if you do it right, you build the right relationship. The first sale is just the first sale. and it leads to the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth.
Hmm.
And I'm
Yeah,
sure in the exhibit business, that's important. In fact, Chris, I remember you sharing a story of somebody you had done some business with in the past and kind of lost track and reconnected on LinkedIn. And then they called you and said, "We need help."
yeah, that's I love hanging my hat on that, right? Because as anybody who's out there putting efforts into LinkedIn and building up their reputation, and at the end of the day, we all need to drive revenue, right? So great conversations and meeting people and making friends is a great part of it. But at the end of the day, we need to make sales. So what you're referring to is a very true circumstance that happened, or example kind of how I think things play out on LinkedIn. There's a woman that I met, I think 2017, 2018, perhaps. She was in my industry on the customer side, on the client side. So she was an exhibit manager for a company in the aesthetic laser space. A small industry, but I do a lot of work kind of in that realm. And we were connected, first level connections. I think we had a conversation at one point a while back, but you lose track of folks, and you kind of up to every now and then if they post it all or whatnot. So, anyways, long story short, we got to 2024, I think, or 2023, and all of a sudden she, you know, kind of shows up, seemingly out of nowhere, right? But it wasn't out of nowhere. She was anonymously, following. And I had been, coming out of COVID and getting back into, events, being there. I kind of doubled down on my LinkedIn effort, and I was showing up pretty regularly and consistently, and posting. And she kind of all of a sudden popped into the feed, and she's like, "Hey, Chris, I don't know if you remember me. I'm so and so. We met a long time ago, but I've been watching what you're doing. I see that you guys are out there. You're delivering, really great creative exhibits, and we're in a really big pickle here. We had put our faith in another vendor, and they have let us down, and we are really scrambling. Our show is in about 6 weeks. Um, I'm hoping that you guys can help us." So that was, really shined a light, for me on like the power of being consistent, showing up, and not just, only posting about business stuff, but about opening myself up to my thoughts on leadership and being a family guy who's a dad and a husband, and just kind of all those steps that we all go through, if we have a family. So she kind of seemingly came out of nowhere. We were able to, hop on a quick call. We fleshed out a design. We delivered, the best that we could do in that short time frame for the money that they had. They were super happy with the experience. So fast forward to 2025, we come back and we did two shows for them this next year. So there was, to tie this back to what you were saying, that first sale becomes kind of the gateway to the next sale, right? So we're not looking for a one-off. I mean, we will certainly roll in and help somebody with a singular event, but ideally, we want to bring on a partnership account, who's doing multiple shows per year, and we want to work with them for years and years. Because we're going to get better every time that we execute for them, and we're going to learn how to work together better. So that long-term consistency is powerful on that end as well. And that's just a great example of like, you don't know who's watching you, you don't know who's kind of paying attention, and in these days, the data suggests that when people actually show up, asking questions, they've done research. They're 60, 70% along the way of
Yep.
on their research journey. And they're choosing to engage with you at this particular point, right? So we didn't start from scratch. This was not an RFP situation. She was not even looking at anybody else. She was panicked for help, right? And she had a budget, and we did. So it wasn't like, open checkbook, whatever it takes type of thing. But, you know, we took the competition out of play because of the work that, I had done and my company had done from a social media standpoint.
So, Chris, one of the things that I know is Posting once a month on LinkedIn, it's not going to really do you any good.
Yeah.
Talk about, you've got a great story about consistency. So talk about the importance of consistency with posting.
My philosophy with consistency is I'm building a portfolio of experiences, and from day to day, some posts do well, some posts don't do that well. I try not to be too concerned with the metrics and the numbers and stuff like that. Although it is a nice little ego boost when something does does well. A lot of people see it, and you get a lot of comments, which is great. But I'm trying to build a consistent, you know, book portfolio, whatever we want to call it, of thought leadership, and humanity, a combination of those things, as well as my own business acumen. So going into 2024, I was doing the coaching, with Brandon, and I said, you know what, I'm going to double down on LinkedIn in 2024. My word of the year will be consistency, and I will do my best to post every day. And what I found was that the previous year in 2023, I was probably putting something online maybe 3 times a week, maybe four. So reasonably consistent. But the challenge that I would have is for every day that I didn't, it made starting again that much harder, right? It's kind of like you go on vacation for 7 days, right? Or yeah, 7 day vacation, and you come back that eighth day, man, that's a hard start, getting going again. If you're only coming out of the weekend and you've only been off for 2 days, then starting on a Monday is a lot easier, right? And from day to day, when I go from Tuesday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Thursday, like starting the next day is that much easier. So I just found for myself that just being consistent and just saying, you know what, I'm going to put something up every day. The truth of the matter is that out of 365 days, I probably missed 5 days over the course of the entire year, but some days I would post a couple of things, right? So I got more than 365 posts out there. And it was, I guess, just that effort of trying new things, finding my voice, trying to figure out, like, what am I talking about? Because it can be very difficult to figure out what's my content. We are blessed in our industry that photographs of events and trade shows and travel and so forth, those are things that people like to see. So that made it, a fair amount easier. The more I moved around, the more shows that I went to, the more experiences that I was having. Just sharing about those things were stuff that would get people to stop scrolling and engage with my content.
I think one thing that people fear, well, I know one thing people fear about content, especially to something like posting every day, uh, is, how do I do that? Because LinkedIn's definitely not Facebook. Nobody cares what you had. Nobody on LinkedIn cares what you had for dinner last night. Uh, but what they do care about is what do you know? What do you know? What do you know about my industry? What are your insights there? What have you learned? What have your challenges been?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does your real life look like? That's what people want to know to build that know, like, and trust. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would. And I think, circle back and take a look at that, LinkedIn is not Facebook statement, because I think what people post and where their content goes is pretty subjective. And I personally have found that my more humanity facing posts, my more personal posts, tend to resonate with and get more attention. So what I've, I guess, tried to do is say, all right, well, listen, if I'm trying to connect with, I know my ICP, typically female, typically between, let's say, 30 and 50, and so a lot of those people are moms, right? And my posts that I put up about being a dad and being a dad of three, and talking about some of my kids' experiences, whether I tie it into a business lesson or not, I used to always try to lean into that, and now I'm not so much. I'm thinking just kind of evolving in that fashion. So I'm not posting about what I had for dinner, but I have posted about I was really worried about my son because he was a shitty student and he couldn't sit still. And now he's in college and he's, on the dean's list because he picked a direction for himself that was all about working with his hands and not taking the normal road, but taking a road less traveled. Right. So, as a for instance, right, for folks who are nervous about posting, or they don't know where they're going to draw from to get these stories, it just you know posting every day forced me to open my mind towards, like, there's cool little stories that are interesting to people out there that you encounter every single day. And this happens to all of us, right? They're interesting little insights that if we just took a second to step back from it and go, huh, that was actually kind of cool. So let me tell a little story around that. And I might relate it to a picture that I had taken a while back in my camera roll. I might relate it to an event that I just went to, or whatever the case. Everybody on the platform is a different person. They're all here for different reasons. I think by and large, we're obviously going to be business people who are primarily, here for business reasons. And we're also looking to find people that we know, like, and trust, as we talked about, right? So my goal is, like, I want to be somebody who, uh, who folks out there who are looking for somebody in the trade show world. Yes, 30 years of experience. I know what I'm doing. My company is very well versed. And at the same time, he's a good, relatable guy. Like, I kind of want to hang out with that guy.
Yep.
So I have found that using my humanity, or the personal side of my life, as something that I talk about on a fairly regular basis, I like to think, I don't know this for sure, but I like to think that it makes me relatable, and it makes me appear very human and very, approachable, right? So that's the know and like part of that formula.
No, it's funny. One of the best received posts I got, a guy he showed his ball was like this far from the hole of making a hole in one.
Yeah,
But I actually, and it was the four guys that were playing golf together. You can picture them with the ball right there. And he had a pretty cool post about, close is not close is close is really good, but not good enough sometimes.
yeah,
But anyway, I recognized the hole and
yeah,
and the golf course, and I just typed in. I remember it was hole number 4 at such and such country club,
yeah,
and I got as many comments on that from people that knew him,
yep.
uh, and those were his friends. So that put me in front of 5, 6, 6, 8 friends of his.
We haven't talked about commenting, but commenting is at
That was
least as
next.
important. Yeah, at least as important as posting, if not more important, right? So that's a great way to get started, right? So if some of the folks who are watching us or listening, on the pod in the future, that's a great way to start, right? You identify, like, who are some people that I want to make friends with, whether they're ICP or influencers in my industry or whatever that case might be. I can find them on LinkedIn. I can follow them by clicking the bell. Every time they post or every time they put something up, I see that. It's in my feed, and it gets served to me every day. And then, go in and start talking to the people that they're talking to, right? So if it's an influencer in my industry, in the event industry, anybody that's commenting on that person's post, excuse me, is likely somebody that I want to talk to. So to your point, get in there, comment, start having conversations within those threads, and then those things can lead to, a phone call. Hey, let's grab a virtual coffee, and you get to know different people through that mechanism, and that's a really cool way to do it, and an easy point of entry. And again, it puts your name in front of 20 new people on a
Yep.
regular basis.
Well, Chris, I've always said. Well, now I'm going to preface this by saying I believe that you need to post valuable content, and you need to comment on other people's posts.
Hmm.
Now, a comment is not great post.
Yeah,
That
true.
comments need to be either insightful, add value, or encouragement. That's what I believe. And I've always said if I could only post or only comment, I would comment.
Yeah. I would agree. And
I
now
mean,
it's kind of
you're
cool. LinkedIn is measuring those. We can see that our comments sometimes has been seen by hundreds. I don't know if I've ever had one thousands, but yeah, you have a good comment that really kind of stirs the pot a little bit, or add some insight, or in your particular example reference point, you know, I'm like you, right? I recognize this hole. I like golf, right? So instantly just commenting on that and knowing what hole it was, all of a sudden all these people are like, yeah, that's a great hole. So you find your people, you find your tribe of people who are interested in the same things.
yep, and that's what we're looking for. So,
Yeah.
Chris, tell us about your adventure into having your own podcast.
Happy to do so. About a year ago right now, Brandon had been, kind of planting the seed, more than planting the seed. Um, Chris, I really think that a podcast, for your company would be a great thing. And like most people, you're like, I'm freaking busy. Like I don't know how I'm gonna work this into my schedule, right? I carry my own, book of business here. I'm sales leader. I mentor people. I got a lot going on. I got a personal life. I got wife, family, all that stuff, right? So the initial story in your brain likely is that too much time. I wouldn't do that, right? That's not me, or I just don't have time for it. But the more podcasts you watch and listen to and see, um, you start thinking, you know what? Maybe this could work. And it was actually one of the other guys in our coaching program, a guy by the name of Michael Cups. He had a podcast. It was super short, and the concept was, three things. Because his deal is that he wrote a book about called Time Bandits, and it's all about like time saving hacks and ways to organize your life such that you're not wasting time. So he had a super efficient, like three questions, literally took 10 to 15 minutes. We did it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm making too big of a deal of this. Maybe it's not that hard. So, anyways, I go to Brandon. I'm like, I'm ready to do it. Can I hire you as a consultant? Um, and we did exactly that. He kind of teed a bunch of stuff up for us, made a list. The list of stuff to do to get your podcast off the ground is actually really big. And that was, couldn't get over the hump. I recruited a co-host partner. She was on board. We were like, we'd have these monthly meetings like, yes, we're going to do this. This is going to be great. We're holding each other accountable. Nothing. Like a month would go by. We'd get back on the same phone and tell the same story. Like, oh shit, got busy. Sorry about that. I had to travel. Let's do it. Right. And this went on for several months. Brandon's like, where are you at with this? And I'm like, we're nowhere. So we also take advantage of Fist Bump being a co-sponsor. So Blue Hive, my company, has ponied up some dough, but we've also partnered with Fist Bump, and that was a huge game changer. They took all of the heavy lift off of my shoulders, and they did all the things that I didn't know how to do, right? They went out and found the voice over artist who made the intro. They did the graphics, and they just do all of the hard stuff. So that's gonna kind of some of the nuts and bolts of how we finally get going. Um, signed the deal in November. Started doing the podcast in January, first of the year. So now we just recorded the 30th episode yesterday. So it was something that I gradually warmed to with regards to the thought of doing it. And then it still took some time to kind of get it to launch, and I needed the help of some professionals to get it to launch. So now to the benefits. So much like being involved in posting on LinkedIn and just showing up and commenting, the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more comfortable you get with being uncomfortable, right? So in the beginning, the first few episodes were super nervous. It's like you're stumbling over everything. You get butterflies in your stomach, and over time, you just get more comfortable with the medium. I think anybody who's watching or listening to this, like this is basically just two guys having a conversation, much like we would sitting around drinking a bourbon around a campfire or smoking a cigar or playing golf or whatever, right? We're just kind of shooting the shit. We're just happen to be doing it, on screen like this. So you get comfortable with the process. One of the one of the benefits, which Brandon did obviously tell us ahead of time, is like it's not just about what we're saying right now, but it's the capture of this content and then it's the repurposing
Yep.
of that content. So Fist Bump does an amazing job with taking all of the video and audio. We cut it up into shorts. I'm able to use that now to go back and have more impactful posting, little 1 minute clips of little videos, from the podcast itself. And I'm able to utilize that, as part of my content play. So it actually takes the load off of my shoulders, because I'm not every day thinking like, what am I doing? What am I posting? Like I will dip into that bucket of content probably 4 or 5 times
Yep.
a week. And now I can easily post a couple times a day if I want, because I just got so much stuff.
So, Chris, we got just a couple of minutes left. What would
Mm-hmm.
you tell the small business owner, or the CEO, or the sales leader of a larger company that's like on the fence? I don't really know whether I should do this LinkedIn thing or not. I know I need to. I don't want to, but I do want
Yeah.
to. What advice would you give them?
My advice is, I guess, this is like there's no silver bullet and there's no magic pill. Like that, like POs don't start raining out of the sky by any means. LinkedIn is a tool in your tool bucket, just like cold calls and cold emails and outreach and snail mail and like all of the things that you do from a sales and marketing effort. Anyways, like this is just another tool, but it's an amplifier as well. Like it, once you establish a presence. One of our commenters here said, how have your online communities changed? So you're building a community. That's a good question, and I can talk to that. Um, but you're building a community. You're building your reputation, so that when you do make a phone call or send a cold or email, they're more apt to know who you are. They're more apt to be like, oh, yep, delete, delete, delete. Oh, I know who that guy is. I watched his podcast or I saw him on LinkedIn. So you help build that reputation and you just kind of grease the skids a little bit for the process. And I think if you're maybe a CEO, or some type of a leader in your industry or organization, like you're just going to get even that much more eyeballs because of your position, right? If you're running the company itself. So think about it from this standpoint: is if you're a CEO or a president or a leader at the top of the food chain, your efforts will actually just reduce friction for all your salespeople, because you're building that reputation. You're the thought leader. You're raising the reputation and the visibility of your organization, and you're gonna make conversations that happen below you in and amongst your salespeople that much easier. So just a lot of great benefits that will come from getting a little comfortable with being uncomfortable and making that leap. It's just I think it's 100% necessary to be. I'm not saying you have to throw everything else out and go all in and spend every single hour of every day, but map out a plan that works for you. You hop on first thing in the morning, you do some comments, maybe you make a post midday, and then you're commenting a little bit. Your total time invested over that day is an hour, something like that,
Yeah.
right? But over time, those hours spent, those are outreach efforts, right? Those are visibility builders. So it's not just fluffy
Yeah.
time. It's work that's building a foundation. Doesn't happen overnight, but over time, you get where you want to go.
Yeah, I would say this, Chris, and I think you and I are proof of this. It works if you work it. You got to
Yeah,
work it.
right,
Chris, it's about time to wrap.
right. It's like yeah, yeah, okay.
About time to wrap
I'm
up.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch base on the question. How have your online communities changed since you guys began podcasting? So just to speak to that, um, I find a lot of the folks who watch my podcasts aren't necessarily customers, but they're other people in my industry. So what it's doing is it's putting my name out, and my own personal brand is growing within the trade show and event industry. So I am now being, sought after to talk on other podcasts, to comment on articles, to participate in ways that I never had the visibility in the past. So I think that that's really cool, and it's raised my own visibility within my industry, such that, call it a thought leadership position or whatever. I'm more well known than I used to be, and I'm more easily found because I have got that much more content out there. So it's grown the community in that
Yeah,
fashion.
and it gives you a lot better chance to be recognized when you call somebody or ask for an appointment or ask for a favor. So, Chris, thanks for being.
Or
Go
you're,
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, or you're walking across the trade show floor and
Yeah,
somebody's like, I know you from LinkedIn.
yeah, I forgot about. Well, yeah, for trade shows for sure. So, Chris, I
Yeah,
appreciate you being on today. Great information.
my pleasure.
Like I said, if you could if you either want to find out from me or Chris, I would say Chris has done it longer and doing it well. Uh, I think I'm doing it well too. I can tell some of the similar stories that Chris did. So, Chris, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, a couple things. Absolutely. I'm active on LinkedIn, as mentioned. I am with Blue Hive Exhibits. My email address at Blue Hive is cdunn at blue-hive.com. And come find my podcast. It's called The Event Marketer's Toolbox. And again, we're kind of specialize in event kind of stuff, but we talk sales, we talk leadership, we talk all things, trade shows, corporate events, and so forth. So couple of different ways, and much like Butch, that show happens live on LinkedIn, and then the recordings are live or it's there forever. On that same link, we're on YouTube and on all of the podcast channels as well. So, again, that's another benefit of working with Fist Bump, because they just help you kind of get that content out there as best as possible.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it greatly. Uh, as we wrap up, well, I'm Butch Nicholson. You can reach me at butch@getfistbumps.com. Our website is getfistbumps.com, and you can reach me on LinkedIn for sure. And I'm sure Chris feels the same way as I do. If I can't help you, I'll tell you I can't help you, but there's a good chance I know somebody who can, and I'll point you in that direction. Uh, One thing to remember here is this isn't about starting over. This is about evolving. You don't have to dive in tomorrow and say you're going to do a year like Chris did. Dive in tomorrow and do it tomorrow. Just take one day at a time and get it done. Uh, I appreciate you being here today. Again, thanks to Fist Bump for sponsoring the show. And we'll be back with another great guest next week, 10 o'clock on Friday morning.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Butch. This was great. Loved it.